The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Welcome back to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host, and we are continuing the conversation with Dr. David Yamane from Wake Forest University, where we were discussing his online free non-college credit course on the sociology of guns. I'm going to kind of pull back a little bit and look at firearms from a higher level, so to speak, 10,000 foot view. There's a ton of uncertainty, not only in our country right now, but in the world. And a lot of it's politics, it's conflict, it's war. Doesn't matter what it is, it's just that there is uncertainty. And there seems to be a divide in between extremes on both sides of the aisle. How do you envision gun ownership in the future? There's tons of assault weapons bans. We're embattled with the Supreme Court right now in Illinois. And how do you envision the future of gun ownership in the United States?
The first thing I like to say when I'm asked this question is that I have a hard enough time understanding the present that predicting the future is a little bit daunting. But I think that one thing I know is that there will be gun ownership, there will be a gun culture. The exact dimensions of it are a little bit harder to pin down, but we have such a long-standing tradition of gun ownership and such a long-standing gun culture that there will be something, which is, again, coming from a place where most of the people that I'm around are fairly liberal. I think that they oftentimes imagine a future like Japan or a future like England or Australia, which I just don't see that coming to pass given our history, our politics, our legal structure. And, what I like to see, ideally, here I'm speaking, more perhaps from the perspective of a gun owner than as a sociologist of guns, is a broadening tent, right? That the gun culture can accommodate more and more people. And I think, the current defensive orientation does draw in more people than some of our sort of historic hunting cultures or recreational shooting cultures or competition shooting cultures that, everybody has, as you well know, some level of concern about personal protection. And many people will address that concern by owning firearms. And so, I think that defensive and also diverse face of gun owners is what the future is. And the more diverse that face is, the more encompassing it is, the stronger the gun culture will be.
Fantastic. And I previously believed this to be an oxymoron, but I want to give it a little explanation. I recently joined a group called Liberal Gun Owners of America, which to me was cognitive dissonance, because you don't think of liberals as gun owners, but in my first marriage, my now ex-wife's family, one of her uncles was in the same fraternity as Al Gore, and her cousin was one of the interns in Al Gore's, and everyone was on Air Force Two. This is before I met her, so very strong commitment to the Democratic Party. And what shocked the you-know-what out of me is they wanted to go shooting with me. And they brought AR-15s, and they brought all their stuff. And I'm like, wow. And that my eyes were just open to this. One of the things that I found, and because I'm interested in firearms, I'm in conservative groups, I'm in liberal groups, and I'm trying to get as much information as I possibly can so I can be a better mentor, a better instructor, learn more as I expand my knowledge base as well. And what I found is in the conservative gun groups, we have what we call scope creep. Not that anyone's a creep, so there are some creeps, but that the discussions are not only about guns. There's humor in it as well, and I get that, and that's part of life. but it's about conspiracy theories, anti-Democrats, Democrats are evil. And I'm repeating this. I'm not saying this so I don't get the hate mail. I'm not saying that. There's always multiple perspectives. But in the liberal gun owners Facebook group, it is just about firearms. It is not about politics or Hunter Biden's dealings or whatever else is, tabloid in the news. And it's very refreshing to me to go on the Facebook group and say, all right, cool, there's someone asking about this firearm, and there's zero politics. Can you talk about the group Liberal Gun Owners of America? What does it do? How can someone join?
Yeah, certainly. I'm not any official representative of the organization, but it's a group that I spend a lot of time engaging with. And I think what you said there is a lot of the motivation for starting it, which were that there are liberal gun owners. Guess what? If you do a survey and you ask people to describe themselves politically, about 20% of the population will self-characterize themselves. 20% of the gun-owning population will characterize themselves as being liberal. There's about 40% conservative and 40% moderate. So liberals are a minority in that, but there's between liberals and moderates, there are more gun owners than there are people who self-describe as conservative. But because sort of gun spaces tend to be dominated by people who are politically conservative, gun shows, gun stores, gun ranges, gun classes, a lot of liberals, go into those spaces and they just don't feel at home because they don't want to, practice their target shooting and have to hear people talking about libtards. And so, people started organizing sort of self-identified liberal gun groups, and the liberal gun owners emerged out of a Facebook group, basically, that this college student started because he wanted to talk about guns with fellow liberals and not talk about politics. And, it's grown into a freestanding organization now, and really tries to approach guns, from the perspective of kind of liberal ideals. And so it's not that it's apolitical, but that it wants to try to figure out how can we advocate simultaneously for gun rights in a very strong way, but also, the reduction of gun-related harms, that how can we advocate for gun rights and public safety at the same time. And I think that's where some of that dissonance comes in, is because we have this polarized political system that says, you're either for gun rights or you're for public safety, as if you have to make a choice between those two things. So the real strength, I think, of the liberal gun owners is that they are trying to find a way that doesn't force us to have to choose between those two things.
Because they're not mutually exclusive.
Not at all.
This might be an idea to get the word out for your class. Have you heard about a group called the Pink Pistols?
Oh yeah, very much so. It's interesting because, one of the things I talk about in my regular gun class, and that'll be a topic in the webinar version also, are diverse gun owning organizations and diverse gun owners. So Pink Pistols, Operation Blazing Swords, you've got the National African American Gun Association, the liberal gun owners, but these groups tend not to get as much attention from people who study guns because they don't fit the narrative that gun owners are old Southern white conservatives. For example, to my knowledge, there's never been an academic study published of the Pink Pistols, although they've been around for decades now. There's a couple of pieces now, including one that I wrote on liberal gun owners. There's some pieces coming out about LGBT gun owners, nothing really about African-American gun owners. And so, it's amazing to me, things that are integral to what gun culture is today that fall outside the boundaries of what most people who are studying guns look at.
Very interesting. And you have a book coming out. Can you talk about that book and where someone can pre-order it?
Yeah, this is 12 years in the making. This is the accumulated wisdom that I have about guns and gun owners, gun culture in America. I've decided a few years back that instead of writing another academic monograph that 400 people would read, including 200 library purchases, that I would try to write something that took what I have learned over the years and make it accessible to a broad audience. So the book is titled Gun Curious, and it tries to get at that curiosity that hopefully I've conveyed somewhat here today, which is, part of my professional orientation as a sociologist, trying to get beyond the surface appearance of things. Also my personal orientation of just being a curious, whether I'm trying to understand religion better or guns, but then also appealing to people's curiosity, that if you are curious to understand why people own guns, how they understand defensive gun ownership, why would you own an AR-15, how do you understand the risk of gun ownership? If you have any kind of curiosity about those questions at all, I try to address them in this book.
I am very much looking forward to reading it. I pre-ordered it on Amazon. So if you go on Amazon, you can either look up Gun Curious as the title or David Yamane as the author. It was very easy. It took me 2 seconds to find, and boom, I'm waiting. I think it said it's coming out in June. Is that correct?
It's being published in June. I thought it was going to be May, but the publisher senses that there may be some interest in this, so they want to give it a little bit more time to build up interest and to get the book out into reviewers' hands and that sort of thing. And I'm excited for people to have an opportunity to look at it because, this is not something that we had really talking about previously, but I had, in pursuing the publication of this book, I got one of the top literary agents in New York to represent the book. He sent it out to 33 different publishers, mostly New York-based, big publishers. All of them passed on the project. And, it wasn't until this small North Carolina-based publisher called McFarland swept in at the last minute that I actually had a publisher for the book. And so I'm anxious to see whether those New York publishers were right, that there isn't an audience for this book, or, whether, I'm right in my hope that there are people out there who don't just want to yell about guns, but actually want to think about guns and to have a conversation about the reality of guns that doesn't just revolve around my rights or guns are ruining society. Those two poles, that we are often, forced to choose between, again, gun rights versus gun safety. They're not mutually exclusive. If people have some curiosity about how we can move beyond those polar opposites, then I invite them to consider the book.
Well, one thing I can assure you is that not including the radio program podcast, my reach is about 50,000 people in Illinois who are gun owners. So I am going to circulate that information like wildfire among all the groups that I manage and I'm in, and my customers and my students. So, and just so the listeners know, I'm not getting a commission on it. This is just to advance the gun industry, the gun culture. That's my goal. That's one of the reasons I do the radio show, is to educate people. So I'm very much looking forward to this. Can you again repeat what your website is and how listeners could contact you if they have any questions?
Yeah, certainly. Most of the things that I'm doing in general, you can access through my personal website, which is davidyamane.com, David, YAMANE.com. For things related to the Gun Curious book, if you go to guncurious.com, you'll find a ton of information about the book there, including some blurbs of people who've endorsed the book, like John Correa from Active Self-Protection, Chris Chang, Top Shot Season 4 champion, and others. And you can also sign up for my email list and have a chance to win perhaps possibly a free signed copy of the book or some other goodies that I have. The with a book like this, the audience is very uncertain how many people are interested. And so these pre-sales of the book are going to be really important for the publisher to know how many of these should we print. And so anybody who's interested in the book, to pre-order it or to at least sign up to get some information from me on guncurious.com would be amazing.
Awesome. And what final thoughts can you offer or share regarding what you do, or maybe even a topic I didn't ask you about that you'd like to talk about?
I will, in the end, spend far more on doing this work than I will ever make from this work. But I'm really investing my time and my energy and, significant years of my life trying to get us so that we can have a better conversation about guns. Right? Not so that we can all 340 million Americans who are very diverse in so many ways to agree on guns, but that we can at least sit down with one another, recognize each other as fellow citizens, and have a civil conversation about this issue, which is not going away, right? Like I said, gun ownership is not going away, gun culture is not going away, and these negative outcomes with firearms that take place are also not going away. And so we need to look at each other across the table and say, I may disagree with you, but I respect the fact that your views of this are sincerely held, and where can we agree? Right? We always talk about where we disagree. For me, light over heat involves shining a light on our points of agreement and not always just focusing on our disagreements.
Fabulous. David, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to our listeners and educate us on and give us hope. In Illinois, there's not a lot of hope these days as far as firearm ownership, because there's rumors and there's actual laws that you can't have certain things or certain ammo, and it's very interesting. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective on the firearms culture.
I really appreciate the opportunity. It's nice to have a long form for a discussion like this, and thank you for the very thoughtful questions.
My pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in class.
Yes, I look forward to having you.
Impressed, people. This guy is absolutely brilliant. And before we continue, I just kind of want to tell everyone about my speaking engagements. I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRESS2logic.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show. There have been some incredible advances in the protection of the Second Amendment throughout the United States. Unfortunately, not in Illinois, but let me give you the update. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry signed into law constitutional carry, and that means you do not need any type of permit to carry a firearm. The constitutional carry law in Louisiana will begin on Independence Day, July 4th, and the carrying of concealed guns by non-felons will be legal without a permit. There's still going to be restrictions on where you can carry a gun, and it's going to be some hot topics during the next session for the legislature, but it's long been an open carry state, and the new law is kind of uncharted territory for Louisiana. The states bordering Louisiana have all passed permitless carry. So The Governor Landry said, today we joined 27 other states in passing constitutional carry. I promised the folks of Louisiana that I would champion constitutional carry into law, and within 2 months, I've honored the commitment. It's fundamentally clear. Law-abiding citizens should never have to seek government permission to safeguard themselves and their families, and today we have secured an incredible victory for Louisiana. Guess what? There's more. Another state became the 29th state in the nation with constitutional carry law, and that is South Carolina. Henry McMaster on Thursday signed permitless carry, and that would be Thursday a week ago, like a week and a half ago, 10 days, signed into law permitless carry, making the second Republican-led state in 2 days to adopt the constitutional carry gun laws, and that's effective immediately. This new law will provide strict, increased penalties for illegal gun use and possession by criminals. Hey, I'm okay with that. Now, law enforcement, prosecutors, and judges can keep violent criminals behind bars where they belong, where they can no longer hurt innocent South Carolinians, and I'm going to add, or anyone visiting the state. This is an NRA-backed bill. It allows eligible citizens 18 years or older to carry a firearm in public without approval and a permit from the government. It was a 28-18 vote in the state Senate, and the House was an 86-33 vote as well. The primary sponsor was Republican State Representative Bobby Cox, who told the News that the signing of the legislation marks a long and hard-fought victory in South Carolina. So the right to carry a gun has been in place for about 5 years there. The ability to legally, openly carry a handgun in South Carolina has been in effect since 2021, but the right was only limited to residents with the concealed carry permit, which doesn't make sense. You get the concealed carry permit, then you can open carry. But that's the way the laws work. I don't always understand them. To get the concealed weapons permit under the old law, the person had to be at least 21 years old and undergo 8 hours of training and, of course, a background check. Now, none of that is required. And this permitless carry law only applies to handguns. There's no state requirement for a permit to possess a rifle, shotgun, or handgun, but the permitless carry only applied to firearms with a length of less than 12 inches, according to the bill McMaster signed at the time. The change to the state law inside a permitless carry interchangeably uses the term firearm and handgun. The bill is very clear that the statute only applies to handguns. So what does that bring the total to? Well, there are 13 states that will honor the Illinois concealed carry permit. Those are the 5 states that border Illinois, which includes Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, Kentucky, and Indiana, and Alabama, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, Nevada, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia, totaling 13 states. Interestingly, we had 13 colonies, but that's neither here nor there. I just saw that as a little bit of a connection. The following states allow constitutional carry without a permit, meaning the federal constitution is your concealed carry permit. And those states include Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana as of July 4th, 2024, Maine, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Texas, Utah, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wyoming. A total of 26 states. So in total, across the United States, there are 39 states that an Illinois concealed carry permit is good in. 39. That is roughly just shy of 80% of states in the country have approved people to carry firearms, to carry handguns. So I don't really get what happens in legislatures kind of like the Illinois legislature or other left-leaning states that don't allow anyone to carry a firearm. What's the difference if I live in Illinois or I live in New York? Shouldn't my right, because it's a federal right, apply to me in every state? And it looks like the Supreme Court is starting to address these issues with the Heller case, the Bruin case. And when I say starts to address these, I mean over years and decades. There is no turn on a dime type, oh, now there's a new issue, now the Supreme Court hears it. It's got to go through all the other lower courts, and I will be bringing you updates. But the updates that I bring you are not updates that are full of minutia that nobody understands. The plaintiff filed something today. Okay, that's great. They filed something. I will report on what the real outcomes are and how it impacts us. Not that Tom DeVore, whom I have a ton of respect for, filed something in court so that he can add one piece of evidence or whatever it happens to be. Though that's minutia that doesn't mean anything to the real world, to the real public, although it does have meaning in the court system. Before I close the show, I do want to clarify one thing that I said earlier. There are 13 states that honor the Illinois permit for concealed carry. The other states, you do not need a permit, even if you are an Illinois resident. If you're unsure, the website to check is handgunlaw.us. That is my resource and the most up-to-date resource out there for handgun law. Hope you all have a safe week. We have monthly concealed carry license CCL classes in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Dates can be seen at firearmmentor.com/classes. If you have a question, we can be reached at www.firearmmentorcard.com. That is our electronic business card, has all of our contact information and links in it. It's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll see you at the shooting range. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor signing off. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.